The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting our Patreon page linked below. Great work, Antonio, and what a great way to start this third compilation of entries from website subscribers of Orchestration Online for the 2023 Orchestration Challenge, orchestrating the opening of the Sonata number 24, Opus 78 by Beethoven. So, I really enjoyed listening to this. I think that there's just so many nice things to it. Yeah. There's a certain kind of sheen of perfection to it, right? You really knew what kinds of sounds you wanted, what kind of effect you wanted, and I think it really shows. And there's a bit of an attempt here to reconcile the whole natural brass approach. And I think that, like, here with your with this F in the your horn and D part, that's about the only spot I think where the the compromise, like with a mezzo forte, right? So if we think mezzo forte going to this stopped F right here, I think that it doesn't quite exactly, work with everything else that is going on at the same time. But it just depends on what the intentions were, and I will talk about that in a bit. It's just, I'm thinking, I'm just wondering. Yeah, so the transposition works out. Yeah, I think that there could possibly be ways of having this play on consonant pitches to the horns in G that would probably be more effective, right? So, anyways, let's not worry about that too much, but jump back to the beginning here. So, speaking of those horns in G, it's just wonderful Beethoven-like opening here with the support of the horns, and like with it being really clear, not merging into the texture of the strings, but just really clearly being its own voice accompanying the strings. So that really is more of a, Beethoven had not really explored all the aspects or had really counted on blending his instruments together, in the way where they sort of form a new sound, right? he does in places, like if you look in his later works, especially like some aspects of the Ninth Symphony, he starts working on those blended sounds, and then you also see that in the Sixth and the Eighth. And yeah, I mean, I wish that I had time to do a really deep analysis into some of those works, but I might do like little short videos on just like little aspects that jump out at me, and I think that's probably the best way to deal with it. So kind of going back here, like I think you forgot to mark a piano here. So whatever perhaps the default dynamic here in the application that you're using, which I'm assuming is a Dorico, or maybe the other one. Suddenly it escapes me at the moment, but that's not Sibelius, right? Or perhaps this is Finale, but anyhow, but yeah, just watch out for that. Like I'm just wondering whether or not the mix in the mock-up was a little stronger on the violin part because it didn't get marked as piano. In terms of the in terms of the slurring here, I think that you could have slurred from beat 1 to the 8th on beat 2, right? Da 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 da, right? And then give us a little bit of a slur here. Da da. Right? One possible false note here is just maybe a little too much bass, and for the way that you are kind of aggregating the color here with the horns and the violins and so on. Perhaps the very last low G is a little too much scope. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't focus in on the intimacy of the ending, right? But still, it's a gorgeous opening. So I mean, really well done. Like no complaints or anything, just suggestions. Now da da da, that's nice. Would you possibly want to tongue the downbeat here? Ta ta ta. Maybe just like give the downbeat a little bit of a push in the articulation. Because I almost feel like slurring this is more effective than slurring across, right? Yeah, but the accompaniment is beautiful. It's just really nicely proportioned. Really kind of no complaints or observations or objections or anything. And I just I love the harmonization that you've got going on here in the first violins, and it's just like wonderfully casual, non-acrobatic figuration that you've got in the violas, and the simplification of the inner parts, I think, makes this work really effectively. And then like diminuendo to mezzo forte, that's lovely. I think this push is authentic. I think it works really, really well. I think if you're going to have such a smooth clarinet part right here, did I say oboe before? Apologies if I did. But yeah, so this if you're going to have this smoothness in the clarinet, then I think that you should emulate it in your string parts, right? So if you're dividing this into half bars on the figuration here, then maybe do the same thing with the violin, so it isn't so choppy, right? So it isn't just down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, right? So rather, it could be da, 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 da. You know what I mean? So it's just like just think about the bowing, right? If you're not a string player yourself, just kind of like imagine the bowing and like the length it would be. Sometimes you'll just see me here, like thinking to myself, working on orchestration. Sometimes not even at my keyboard, but just sort of thinking. And I might, you might see my left hand just kind of go over different finger positions as I sort of work out the phrasing. and how to notate certain things, like whether or not the viola should be in treble clef or alto clef and so on, or like the how I'm going to divide up the bars. My right hand might start moving back and forth like it's a like in that bowing position for a violin or viola. So don't be surprised if you start doing that more as you take on more work as an orchestrator. See, this beautiful flow right in here. So that just kind of takes us to this. I mean, do you really want the flute to go ta 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 ba 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 in your bassoon ba 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 ba? I mean, do you really want that, or da ta 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 ta? Right, to slur those, and then the bassoon going da 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 da. Right. It doesn't take away from the sense of leggermente for those parts to be slurred rather than individually articulated. Right? It just depends on how much how much of that nervous energy do you want. And then I love the support that you give here to your bassoons, and like the way that you've scored it, you don't need any harmonic support for the flute part. It's really nicely done. And then coming in here, bassoons rolling in from below into the lower string parts, doubling them, and then with this part right in here, see, you are doing one of the things that I have in my evaluation criteria, which is you are setting up the harmonic density to go forward into the next section, right? And so in the next section, I have the questions of, are you going to maintain the strength? Are you going to go to the same texture or not, right? And you decide not to. And the way that you get there is by, you take the crescendo to a forte piano, and then the forte piano it trades off to the to your winds. One little note here: you really would need to have a forte piano, or even just piano, just slurring up to piano, right? For the D horn here. Otherwise, it's really going to have like a D horn is almost a C basso, right? So it's got some projection. It's got a bigger sound, right? Even though maybe not a stronger sound, but it just has kind of this big round sound. So you might want to just control that a little bit, and maybe even to the point of marking this G as an eighth note, right? So that it cuts off very quickly. Now, looking at the sort of perfection of logic that you've got in your textures in here, it makes me wonder whether or not the winds follow the strings and horns and bassoon so logically, right? Because it doesn't feel that way to me, but that's just my arbitrary feeling, right? One little thing right here, that if you're going to go ta with your with all of your winds, then you really need a ta for the you don't want to slur across that. You want a ta, the beginning of the articulation for the slur on the downbeat, all together, right? The same thing here. I would just cut this slur and just have like a, maybe an eighth note, or just piano on a quarter note. All right. And this is lovely. Da da. Just like you could even make these into eighth notes as well. Just a little push. Ba ba da 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 da. Yeah, just really set up beautifully. I mean, I would have loved to hear you take on a longer stretch of this, Antonio, in say in as a Patreon supporter. It would have been great to hear how you would have handled section B and C and so on, or maybe even just the entire movement, because this really is good work. I think you should feel proud of this. I mean, I was just saying at the beginning of this video that this was, a great way to start it, and I feel it is, because it really does kind of like, it is done in that 19th century style, okay, and you put a lot of thought into it, and you had a really clear idea of the colors that you wanted, and the colors feel authentic to the period. They don't have to be authentic, right? Like any of our efforts might be chopped to bits by by somebody who is really an expert in that field and that period, and who has really studied it, and if I were a picky kind of a person, I could probably do that to my own orchestration and just, say, oh, this is wrong and that's wrong and blah, blah, blah. But, the point of this challenge, right, is to not be exactly like Beethoven, right? It is to write, whatever you feel like. What is your response to this material, right? And that is authentic to you, right? All right. So so those are my thoughts on your score, Antonio. I mean, I thought it just was such a great job. Maybe some ta on the downbeat, right, of these little phrase groups. Maybe slurring by the half bar. Every two beats in the violin part, just to really kind of match the smoothness of the clarinet solo above, and then maybe adding slurs to this. I feel I don't feel like you're gaining anything by but I mean, if you feel that kind of just really abrupt kind of is authentic to your interpretation, then leave it in. My suggestions are just suggestions, right? And then of course this very noble beginning is beautiful. So if I were just to kind of run down my evaluation criteria, does the intro set the mood effectively? Yes, it does. Does the melody start with elegance with this clarinet solo? Yes, it does. Is there a natural transition to octaves? That wasn't necessarily like the focus of the way that you scored this, but I would say there's a natural transition forward to this harmony, right? And maybe adding slurs to the first violin part would make it feel more seamless, right? Does it expand without clogging up? It does, but like the way that you scored this, isn't the same kind of expansion as I'm really talking about in my original criteria as they developed from my interpretation, right? So it's not quite a fair comparison. Contrast with the theme, absolutely. Contrast between lines, yes. Harmonic support needed, not really with the way that you've scored it, but the pizzicato does well enough under the bassoon part. I think that once you've told us that this is the first bassoon player, right? Then you don't need this anymore, right? Or sorry, you don't need this, right? Because we already know that first voice is the first bassoonist. So here we're seeing the second voice come in, and we know that it's the second. Marking it as 2 is fine, but we don't need the second notification that this is the first player. All right. And then, emphatic color of line, yes. These octaves are beautiful. Harmonic density that sets up the next bar, absolutely. Then, my questions are maintaining strength, same texture, no. Like you went for a different texture and that perfectly, you validate it with your choices. Even if it doesn't feel natural to me, it doesn't matter. Then, did you contrast texture and dynamics? Yes, you did, right? Or at least with the texture. You could have pushed these winds here and kept them at a forte and here, and then had like a contrast between different levels of dynamics, right? Too, you could have done as well. But anyways, I wouldn't want to mess with it too much, because your ideas, if they felt right to you, they feel right to me in the context of your scoring. You certainly didn't make like a bunch of errors or a bunch of things that I need to correct or anything. So great work once again, Antonio. It's such a great start that it's giving me a lot of energy to go and look at the next score. So let's do that now. Ah, Roque, how great to get another score from you, and what an intriguing collection of different ideas and colors and innovations and so on. I feel that you need to work a little bit more on your proofreading because, I mean, there are some things just even listening to the mock-up and not paying attention to what's on the page, you can sort of hear conflicts and different things. But like I'll talk about those as we go along. All right. All right. So let's sort of start off with the whole question about the horns in F, horns in C, basso, and so on. So really, the minute that you sort of start off with this, F major seventh chord, like you are obviously not scoring in the time period of Beethoven at all, right? And then there are a couple other choices in here with the way things are scored that like you really are not doing Beethoven scoring. So I don't think that you needed to worry about trying to sort of stay true to the whole natural horn thing. And in fact, if we look at the scoring going forward that you have for these instruments, obviously you were not really taking any of that into account, right? So this could have all just been scored with F horns, is what I'm trying to say, and it just would have been clearer. So I would say that if you're going to build on this, and like maybe you say score the entire movement and maybe get it played with some people that then just definitely go to regular old F horns. Don't worry about natural horns, especially like just from the very first chord, right? Now the only thing here is that maybe you intended this E to be a C, so da 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 rather than da 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 da. I actually like, if this was a mistake, I actually prefer the mistake, right? Just because it's original, right? Like I think about like how many people are just doing it the normal way, including myself, and then here, Roque, you're doing it, you're just like, you're putting a different spin on it entirely. Okay, so which I like. I think it's very fun. So in terms of like the scoring here, like I don't have a problem with your, like okay, so like looking at this as like a C basso horn, right? It would actually be better if this were even if it were a natural horn for it to be in F, because then you would just get the low C, right? You get the next C down, which is a really stable pitch for for a natural horn on that low C, and you wouldn't have to score it in F, which is is a kind of a, I think it's a half stop note. I don't have all of the stoppings memorized in my head, but yeah, so I think F is a half stop note there. So it's you kind of get a kind of a sound rather than a ooh, which is really kind of, I think you prefer the latter, right? All right, so I like the string scoring in here. I think that it works all right. Except that here you need to resolve, right? So, da 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 da. So this B flat needs to go to an A, right? And then then this F could continue holding, right? So when you end up with this C, you need to have the little bit of harmonic support underneath. It doesn't have to have all the horns and the cellos and everything else, but yeah. All right. So now going on, oboe, da da da, bum 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 bum. I really love the way that you just you start off almost with this kind of like obad type of wind scoring with just a little bit of strings, right? And it sort of it kind of opens out into the horns and the clarinets going forward. Da, 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 da. This is really lovely the way that you got it in here. And then, of course, I mean, looking at this, like there would be so many, kind of half stop, 3/4 stop notes in here in both parts, right? That it. This just is really not a natural horn part. I mean, yes, a natural horn player could play it, but like in terms of trying to get more consonant notes and more open tones and everything like that, you'd be better off with say perhaps the basso horns being an octave higher, and there'd be more available open pitches and so on. All right, so it's just like the way that it's scored. It really this really is like modern horn scoring, not natural horn scoring. So it really isn't a question of like whether or not it works. It's just it works fine in today's period. And this is lovely, just a little touch of bassoon and so on. And I just love the combination of color here. The first clarinet, on top of the horns and so on, and I think it's really lovely. And you kept your horns at pianissimo, so that balances really nicely. Now, jumping back to the strings, this is nice. I mean, if you can scoring it the way that it is here, that's perfectly fine. I think that you should reinitialize the dynamics here, right? So here you had this piano entrance. If it's still piano, I think you should say so here, because a lot of times people will just start at the allegro, so it's convenient to have the marking there. And you don't really need to mark articulation styles. You don't need to put in staccato here. There will be the shortness of the note will be implied. And this is all kind of fine right in here. Now here's where we get into a little bit of problem, okay? And by the way, just if there may be one or two off notes in here, I thought I might have heard one or two, so just maybe double check on that. But I might be wrong. My memory might be playing tricks on me. All right, so here we're getting into yada-da-da-da-da-da-dum. So in the last score that we looked at, the first score of this video, Antonio score, I was sort of questioning whether or not the very abrupt, singly articulated notes in the winds for this part made sense. Maybe it could even have been that he left off the articulation mark, right? Because there was nothing marked. Now here you have left no doubt by putting in staccato part markings on your clarinet part. Now here, you don't need to mark one again, right? So because it's just ongoing, so we know it's the same thing. And just to sort of really underline that, you've added pizzicato before. So I got to tell you that this is really fast pizzicato. 16th notes at 120. It's just about as fast as a player could clearly play, and it really is just kind of not the. It's a very hurried kind of a sound, right? Rather than having this kind of wonderful kind of floating out of the music, this just sort of feeling of the spirit being unleashed, right? We have more this kind of nervous, furious kind of, how fast can you accurately pluck that with a single finger? I mean, this is just about as fast as I can go. And I had some experience, not extensive experience, but some experience as a string player. And of course, as you've probably seen on my wall and some of my live shots, I've got some mandolins, but I always play those with picks, so you get the up-down kind of thing, which helps you to play faster. Okay, so I'm just saying that this is really fast to be doing this, pluck, 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 pluck. If you actually cannot say pluck on each one fast enough to be clear, that's the same exact kind of problem that the players are going to be facing. So it's not that it's impossible, it's just that it's ungainly, right? It's an effort. It doesn't have this, wonderful kind of chuckling sound that you get from single tonguing, or even double tonguing from a flute. The flute player might be just going tuck 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 tuck, right? But the oboist will be easily going ta 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 ta, because they're very single tonguing is very easy for them on the double reeds, and any decent clarinet player should be able to single tongue that. So yeah, so this is all nicely done. I like the little contrabassoon part coming in there. Okay, so here's where you have a little bit of an error, right? Why is this a B flat? Shouldn't it be an A? All right, so here we have an A. Here we have an A. Why is this a B flat? Right? It's just a little error. So look, just maybe try to proofread your parts a little bit more, right? All right, so continuing on. Actually, before we continue on, let's go back and think forward from the beginning on my evaluation criteria, right? So does the intro set the mood effectively? I think for what you're trying to do, it does a beautiful job. you know? And then does the melody start with elegance? And I think so. I mean, it just has this wonderful light kind of, like I was saying, an obad, right? So like a group of almost like chamber, like a chamber-ish ensemble of players. You know, like you might see at the park, some string players, some wind players, usually like a wind band or some kind of thing. So it has that kind of feeling to it, that vibe, and I love the harmony going forwards. It's all good. Don't worry about this flute part being too low. It all kind of works with the way that you have set everything up. And the same thing here. This flute stuff isn't too low, but there is a wrong note here. So we'll talk about that in a minute. All right. So, is there a natural flow to the patterns of the left hand in the piano? I think so. And then, are you expanding without clogging up? Very much so. So, do you contrast with the theme? Yes, you do. Contrast between lines? Yes. Harmonic support needed? Not really. I mean, you add a little bit of extra, extra emphasis to the end of the, to sort of the end of this da 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 da, right? You're just like you're going ba 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 with a da in the contrabassoon part and the pizzicato and the double bass. And it's interesting. You leave off the cello note here. You could easily play it, but like I'm not seeing any pizzicato on this, right? So maybe you intended this to be pizzicato and then this is arco, right? Oh, I see. That's right. Pizzicato from the beginning. But my apologies. Sorry. I was just focusing in on this. Yeah, so it is pizzicato. So that's it's like, is it easier for a cellist to be playing this than it would be for something you put under the shoulder, like violin and viola? I'm not so sure. All right, and then arco. So going on, emphatic color of line. Yes, this is something I'm seeing a lot now. Is like octaves in this in the violins, and nicely worked out in terms of the slurs. Up, down, up, bum. Right, so here we have a push forward. Where does the dynamic end up? Right, we have a crescendo, and then we're just going to drop back to down to piano. If that's so, then it should be marked in your violin part, shouldn't it? All right, and then how big of a crescendo is this? I think you should tell the conductor and the players. So if you're going up to mezzo forte, right, and then suddenly dropping off to piano, that makes more of a difference, right? So if you really want that kind of an emphasis, but like what you could have done, right, is since you're setting up the harmonic density a bit, not really that much, but you're doing some. Like you could have given this B flat to the viola and kept on with this C and the cellos, right? For instance. And there are even more elaborate ways of getting the ear ready for the increased density of the harmony in this bar. So you could easily have kept the dynamic loud, right? So that this was all mezzo forte with everybody. Da 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 bum bum bum. Then soft, soft, dun dun dun, soft, soft. Do you see what I mean? Because like Beethoven, like the thing about it is that like Beethoven can tell you to go back down to piano, but he's got the fact that he has a wider level of density there in the harmony compensates, and he's playing on a percussion instrument, right? The piano is 88 percussion instruments stuck together, played by 10 fingers. So he can get away with dropping things down to piano again, but in terms of the orchestra, right, you may want to keep it strong, right, just so that there's more continuity there. So things lead to other things rather than just falling off a cliff. So, I'm not going to try to talk you out of the way that you've done it, but I just want you to think about these, different solutions to different problems, right? Okay. So, I like the contrast here. It's really lovely. Bum, 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 dun, dun. Like, so where was that? There was this one wrong note. Yeah, it's here. This C in the oboes, right? You've got a B here and a C there, right? So like just maybe do a bit of a proofread, listen, um, what the mock-up for is for originally in Sibelius and other notation software really is not so much to, like, the original purpose of it was not so much to produce something that could be used in a multimedia situation for rehearsals and and even just to replace the sound of the actual live players like we see today. But the original idea was to proofread, right? So really just listen to it and listen for those conflicts, right, that occur when you have got a wrong note, right? Maybe copy paste errors or just carelessness. And for all I know, like I was saying before, this might be an error. Maybe this was intended to be C instead of E. All right. I actually like the error if that's so. All right. So, ultimately, all you needed was two modern horns, two modern valve horns, not natural horns. This all could have just been played by just a pair of horns. And yeah, I mean, I feel it hangs together. That's the thing, Roque. I mean, it's a really nice effort. It has beautiful colors. It's really imaginative, and you're not really trying to sound like Beethoven or like really all that inspired by the sound of the 19th century. I think you're inspired more by like the possibilities of the different colors and the contrasts and so on. And I really, I relate to that. I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for that. So, just one last little observation. If you're going to do this the second time, maybe do it the first time too. And I think there'll be more cohesion between these two parts and the echo here, right? All right, so those are my comments on your score, and just thanks once again for staying in the game, sending me another score, and giving me more things to talk about, because I always enjoy looking at your scores. And wow, I'm just imagining you taking on the next year's piece, which as I've mentioned in other videos, is it's a piece that is by a composer that's well known to everybody, in a style that you would just never imagine. That it's just like the people who follow that composer would listen to it and say, "Is that this other composer, or what year was that written?" What after you tell them who it actually is, they might say, "Oh wow, I just would never imagine that would be a piece by that composer," and yet it is a piece which I feel should be timeless, and it should be played a lot more at recitals, at piano recitals. So anyhow, your take on that piece, even just like the beginning of it, it would be really amazing to hear. So thanks very much, and now let's take a look at the next score. Nice work, Usteem. I mean, a really nice, colorful, very, very different kind of an approach than kind of the average of the scores that we're getting. And I count myself among the average. And by average, I don't mean that the efforts are average. I mean, it's just like it's a kind of the more typical approach that I'm seeing from different orchestrators. So it's a pretty so far pretty original thing to start very, very low like this, bassoons and horns and so on. So so just some comments, some aesthetics. All right, like and it all goes back to that question in my evaluation criteria. Does the intro set the mood effectively, right? So here, I mean, I feel that you do. right? Except when you add the flute above, right? So I mean that's just a choice. If if you feel like leaving it in, of course that is not my decision or anything. But you know, it's like all by itself, it's a really good intro, and I feel that there could be even more harmony here in the second bassoon part, right? So the second bassoon and the so both bassoon parts and the horns could work together to create a beautiful low chorale, right? And let's face it, you are not really scoring for natural horns here, right? So if you're not even scoring for natural horns, but just regular modern valve horns of today, you could have four horns in F, right? And those four horns could just play a beautiful low horn chorale, with some help from bassoons perhaps. And and you do not even need this flute above, right? I understand the impulse to have some icing up there, but the thing is that this takes away, like, it's almost like saying, like while the horns and the bassoons down here are making this beautiful statement, you're distracting the listener by saying, hey, preview of coming attractions. The flute is going to be playing up high. Well, we don't need to know that yet. All we need to do is focus on this rich, chocolatey, dark, wonderful kind of sound. I see what you did here with the 3/4 and everything else. And yeah, I mean, you'd also do 4/4 time and then like get rid of the fermata, right? I would say for your final score, put it back the way that Beethoven had it. Put in fermata, caesura, whatever you need to make the point. Okay, but but I'm not going to be too picky about it, except for da 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 dum. Right? It's 32nd notes, not 16th notes. All right. Okay, and that brings up another problem now. All right, and that also has to do with proportion. Right. So a part of aesthetics is proportion, right? So your adagio was almost an andante, and your allegro monotropo is a little too monotropo. It is almost allegretto, all right? So it is allegretto at 104. So the difference between the tempo in this opening part and this following part is not very different, right? I think this was 96 or something, or it's quite fast. It's like about the fastest one I've seen so far, or heard in mock-ups. So seriously, adagio cantabile, slowly singing, right? So you can make this a lot slow, and especially with such low, beautiful sounds, you definitely can make this slower and slower, right? And just as rich as you possibly can. Cut the flute, and then monotropo. I mean, at least 108, if not 112 or 120, right? That's how most people play it. Like, perhaps you grew up listening to a different pianist and your preferred tempo is 104. Okay, well, I appreciate that. But the adagio, there really just needs to be more of a difference in tempo between the beginning and between the intro and the first theme. It just felt a little, and then when you're adding all of this tenuto staccato, it sort of feels a little tiptoeing. Do you know what I mean? At that slower tempo. So that's the, like, does the intro set up the mood effectively? Yes, without the flute, right? Okay, so I'm sorry. I keep sounding like I'm trying to talk you out of putting the flute in here. I'm not. I'm just saying like what would work better for the aesthetics of it according to my feeble interpretation of that. Now, here you have first flute continuing on, doubled by both sets of violins at first, and then just going forwards. The firsts. And then here you got divisi, spreading it a little bit. So, having said all that, does the melody start with elegance? And I feel that it does, except that what you should know is that all of the violins playing at the same time as the flute is incredibly absorptive of the flute's ability to project. You are scoring this flute in like the weakest area of its register. It's just, You know, at the most that it will do until you get to this G is just add a teeny bit of thickening to the violins. It will have almost no life of its own, right? Now, I mean, if you want something that will play a greater role in the overall warmth and identity of this line, your answer is the oboe or maybe clarinet, right? Although the clarinet sound really does get absorbed by the strings, but it does add a lot to it, right? It adds this wonderful kind of cool cushioning. But the flute adds almost nothing, right? Unless the player plays out, and then you would need to mark it like mezzo forte solo, right? But you haven't done that. You've just assumed that the flute is strong enough. Now going forward, the first flute part is great here. It's absolutely great. But the second flute part might as well be played by this, say, like oboe or clarinet. So yeah, it really is like, all of this lower flute stuff until you get to right around like C, like D, C, F, and so on. But the first two notes here really are not that strong. And I would say that, seeing as how you have a crescendo here in the violins, it really is going to soak up what's going on in the second flute. No question. So yeah, so it's a little, it's just like not exactly like the flute scoring in general, right, is really at a disadvantage. Like, and here, like here, you seem to be aware of that because you jump up to this, right? And of course, I mean, you could go all the way down to a B, right? Most flutes today have a B foot, right, that go all the way down to that low pitch. But really, I mean, it would be better for you to just leave off the second flute from this C, right? And then here you have yada-da-da-da-da-da-dum. So you have these combinations of a due flutes and clarinets combined with violins. Once again, the flutes are going to make almost no difference. And then the same thing is true here when you have the flutes playing against the a due oboes and second violins. All right, so what is going on here is that that whenever you combine flutes or any winds a due like this with two parts playing in unison, you get a different color than the initial color. For flutes, it's not so different, but it's more of a breathy sound, right? There's more breath than there is timbre, right? With oboes, you get kind of a more trumpet-like sound because the players are taking away some of their natural expression, their natural freedom of expression, in order so that the two players will combine perfectly, right? And there's a little bit of that to the bassoons, though not quite as extensive. And bassoons play a due all the time, right? And like unless the part is really intended to play out and be very, very expressive, like it's not such a big worry, and they're almost never placed a due up in the tenor register. All right. Now with clarinets, it is kind of a phased sound because it's a completely non-vibrato, clear tone, right? And when you put those two tones right next to each other with a kind of the kind of harmonic overtones that the clarinet has, the odd-numbered overtones, then you just get that phase kind of a sound. Now, all of these instruments are playing along with strings, and the strings absorb some of that roughness, right? But I would just say that the flute part here is still, even with a due and everything else, is still pretty much wasted, right? I mean, you will like just take it out of your mock-up and play it, and then just see if there's all that much of a difference with them in or with them out, right? Because you haven't asked the players to play any louder, which would help a little, but still, it kind of goes against just the natural resonance of all these other instruments. All right, so just like really try not to score so low in sort of mixed and louder textures with your flutes. All right, now like having said all that, like you have very soft textures in here, so you think like the flute would have more of a chance to participate, to make a difference, but it's still with the way that you have set out all of these passages, the doubling for the strings and all these other kinds of things, especially, like those things absorb that sound, so that really is not contributing almost, it's just really not contributing much. All right, so now, but to get back to the original question of does the melody start with elegance? Yes, it does. All right. Is there a natural transition to octaves? Yes, there is. So it's really nicely done in terms of that regard. Now, I don't think you need to overdo it so much with tenuto marks and tenuto staccato and so on. Tenuto staccato was like putting your finger on a piece of sticky tape and pulling it off, right? So you get the sticky thing, and then you get the removal. So it's right? So it isn't doink doink, and it isn't right? That you would get if you really want that sort of short, pushed sound. Then it would be better to just mark these as tenuto eighth notes with a rest in between each, right? So then you get the But with this tenuto staccato, you get right? So there's like the kind of a sticky release. So, and I think that like it just gets to be too much. Like you have so much of it going on here that I think that the ear starts to get tired of it, right? So that is the risk. All right, is there a natural flow though? Like we should go back to that question. And I think perhaps the bowings are a little bit too separated here. You're going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Do you see what I mean? This is like So like I think that just you need to go. I mean, I think you could have longer bowing like bar beam. Excuse me. Slur to the half bar. So da 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 da. Right. Down, up, down, up. I just think it's a lot smoother. And then here, like instead of this being just tenuto, make it tenuto, make it portato with the slur on it. So so it has a kind of a lift to it, right? And then this is really lovely, the first bassoon part in here. It's just really, really great. It's nicely set up, right? Yeah, but it just like, and then the sort of tiptoeing. I mean, I think you would be better off just with eighths, like tenuto eighths with a rests in between. I think it would just work better for you here. I mean, it's very, very low. Like there's a certain element of weight at the bottom, right? So like here you've set up this very grim, or not grim, but very having a lot of gravity here with your horns and bassoons and so on. But then here, like with all of these close harmonic intervals in your lower instruments, especially in your double basses, I think it just ends up being very draggy against these, this beautiful high flute and violin line and so on. Okay, I like the slurs on da-da-da-da-dum. That's all really nice. Contrast with theme, we've got it. Expanding without clogging up, right? That is clogging up, I would say. Right, but one way or another, this does contrast really nicely. I like the trading off between the different groups of instruments. Firsts to seconds to violas and cellos. That's nice. All right, and then here we go to emphatic color of line. You've got it. I don't think you need to have the dynamic so soft. It's like everything is incredibly soft throughout this, right? I mean, you could easily go crescendo to mezzo forte here from piano, right? You don't need to go really, really soft crescendo to mezzo. It just feels like you're pulling your punches at all times, like you're not really committing. I think you could get more, more muscle out of this. Yeah. Yeah, and this, I think you can just let go. I don't think you need to go, right? I don't think you need to go tenuto staccato here. I think that you should have matching slurring and articulation, though, for whatever you're doing here in your violas and your oboes. Yeah, so same slur. Like, here you're going ta, ta, ya, and here you're going, n. You know what I mean? So it'd be better to go, right? Same thing here. Ta, dun. Yeah, but it's like, see here you're building up a lot of harmonic density. I think it's beautifully done, and then you suddenly drop down like subito piano. If you're only going to mezzo piano, you don't have to say subito piano, right? It's just soft. Da 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 da, mezzo piano, da da da, soft, da da da. There's nothing too subito about it. It's like your next door neighbor. If you go out to check your mail in your mailbox, are you suddenly over on your neighbor's property? It's just like it's right there. I think like if it's mezzo forte or pianissimo or something, I think that's subito. Like if it's mezzo forte from piano or pianissimo from mezzo piano, I think that those are subito. So just think like two degrees up or down, right? And then here, like you don't really need to go subito again. Just soft da 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 da. It's just easy. Just drop it back down to piano. We don't need to see subito. We'll understand that. Now here, I would just do staccato on this. I wouldn't try to do like a. It's just too fussy. I think you're getting too in love with the tenuto staccato here. Maybe you don't need any articulation at all, right? Any special articulation. Yeah, so you're thinking about divisi and unison and so on. That's all good. Yeah. So I've been very, very picky about this Usteem, but the fact of it is, like, if you were a perfect orchestrator, you wouldn't be bothering sending this to me, right? You wouldn't need any help on it at all. So just my thoughts about it, and hopefully, like, it's just things for you to think about, and just like trying to get ahead of it a little bit more, like on your next attempts and your next orchestrations, and wow, I just really. It was such an imaginative approach with everything, and just really going your own way with this. Some of your own ideas that I would really love to see how you would handle next year's orchestration challenge, which is like I was saying in the previous when I was telling Roque, it's like completely different from this piece, a different era, a different composer, and a different style that you would never imagine from that composer. And and the challenge itself, like every one of these pieces has a challenge built into it, but the actual challenge of making it sound convincingly orchestral that has got really built into the next one. So yeah. But anyways, I think I've said enough. I think that this was an excellent effort, and I think you gave me a lot to think about, and hopefully I've given you a lot to think about in terms of ways to deal with this. One just overall thing I would just say is simplify. Don't get too heavy on the bass. Okay, let the brighter colors show above, and try to keep them simple as well. And then I think you just sort of the more you do that, the more authentic it will feel. All right. So, great work. Now, let's go on to the next score. That's a really solid piece of orchestration there, Frano. I really like the kind of full-bloodedness of it, the real intensity. So, all right. So I think that there are some misconceptions I think I could clear up for you. You've been in these orchestration challenges for a while, and you've heard me talk about how you should never, ever, ever use A1. All right, please. So like, I don't know, maybe you forgot me mentioning it for the last 2 or 3 times, but just seriously, never use A1 in your score ever again, okay? Just it is not a marking that is used ever. All right. Now, if you wanted to tell us that this is intended to be the first player, right, your first oboe player, then that's what you do, right? But never tell us with one, because it's sort of saying like, hey, I would like one player to play here, but you're not telling us which one it is. So is it the first clarinetist, the second clarinetist? Who is it? You're not telling us, right? So you gotta tell us who is playing here. So I'm going to assume you mean the first player, right? They are the ones who usually get the solos in a situation like this, or the exposed melodies when there are exposed single melodies from a wind instrument. So usually that's the first player. Okay. Now here, this, you're giving us a due, right? A2, right? Okay, so that's all good. But then here you're saying a due with these parts, right? So that doesn't make any sense to me. Here you have two oboes and two clarinets. We know that this is two players, right? We don't need to know that. I mean, this is completely unnecessary, right? So I'm just going to erase that. Okay. Now here, once again, A1. So, they're with one, with which one? With number one, right? So you want number one. So please, so this is something. I mean, you've been around these challenges, Frano, and I'm so happy that you're included and that you continue to enter in them. But please don't use A1 again, right? So like you've heard me complain about it. Don't ever use it again. All right? And just to give you, because like you are going to your orchestration is getting so good. You obviously are going to be performed and so on, orchestrally with your works, and maybe you already have. So just don't use this, okay? It is not going to help you. All right, same thing here. This should be your first player. Okay, so but what about him? Who's this? Is this two clarinets, one clarinet? Which one is it? Let's say that it's first clarinet, all right? All right, and then, so once again, a due, right? Why would we need to know that there are two players here, or need to be told, right? Because, like, we can see that there are two players here. You would only use a due when you have a single line and you're telling the score reader, the conductor, the copyist, that two players are going to be playing this, right? So the copyist will see this and say, oh yeah, okay, well, I'll score out two parts that both include this line, right? So, but otherwise, you don't need it. Like, if you have an interval like this, it's obvious that that's two players. You don't need to tell us, right? Okay, and then same thing here, all right? And then, of course, the piccolo is just a single instrument, so it doesn't need any markings like that. All right, so let's talk about the character of the piece, right? So you didn't really score this in too much of a Beethoven style, right? If you'd kept the harmony simple, especially in these two bars and right here, and I'll talk about how that, the simplification of it would possibly work. But if you kept it simpler and more straightforward, right, rather than so heavily harmonized, then I would say, yeah, it is more of a early 19th century interpretation. So therefore, two horns in G, that's perfectly legitimate. Okay. Now, of course, like if you look at like what pitches are you asking for in your horns in G, here you got a couple of Fs, right? So those will be, I think, half stopped. And then here you've got this half or three-quarter stop B. I should really keep a chart close by because I'm not an expert on the stopping. But yeah, partially stopped B right here and this F here as well. So, I mean, considering that this brass is working alongside your trombones and so on, it's not that big of a crisis. That's not, a couple of sort of slightly squashed sounding pitches within this brass harmony is not going to stick out, especially when accompanied by trombones, rather than more horns, right? So it's all fine. There's like nothing wrong with it, and there's nothing out of character really for that. And your timpani scoring, you're using 4 kettles here, right? Like a G, a B, a C, and a D. And that's all, that's all perfectly legitimate. Usually, though, I would say in a situation like this, even if it is like an inverted chord, the way that this is right here, still Beethoven wouldn't be hitting the bottom note of the inversion in the timpani. They would be hitting like the root of the chord, right? What is the perceived root of the chord, right? So if you look at like, what is the root here, even though we've got essentially a 6-3 chord, right, with a B at the bottom of a G chord, it's still a G chord. So probably Beethoven would give it this G, right, rather than this B. And then that frees up, like you only have to have 3 kettles instead of 4. Now I used 4 kettles on the second movement of the of this piece in my transcription, but I didn't use any kettles in the first movement. Anyway, I mean, not a big concern, but still, yeah. But I think like if you hit a G here, so it doesn't have to be the same, even though these are B's and this could be a G. Just experiment with that, just change this to a G and see like whether or not it feels more authentic. Now, right in here, like, what does Beethoven do in the original? He gives you the root of the descending C major chord, and then he gives you the 7th, right? Now, you took away the 7th. There is no 7th that pushes the harmony back to the 1 here, right? And what you can really hear it in this, da 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 dum ba ba, like this da 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 dum. It's really intended to be played against like the tension of this chord, is supposed to kind of work against that that dominant 7th, right? In this case, like the B flat, right, would just kind of create that, especially with the C sharp, right in here. It creates that that willingness to go back to the G, right? Just to get back to it. So anyway, so those are a few things to think about just in terms of like authenticity, right? Like if you're thinking like what about my scoring makes this more or less like Beethoven's period, right? So like now let's just like talk about like in general the scoring of the piece. This is really lovely right in here. This ba da 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 da. And so like if you're gonna do 2 notes in a row and they're going to be slurred, you're going to have a slur over them, you might want to have like say maybe portato. Let's see here, let's move this into view. Maybe you could have these 2 pitches here, you could sort of do it like that. You could even make the whole thing portato if you wanted to, right? Or you could do this. Da 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 da. So like there could be like a slight lift here, right, just before this, beat 2.5, right? And then and the same thing here, right? Couldn't we just move this slur back? Oops. Yeah, and same thing here. Right, da 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 da. Yeah. And now here, like you're hanging on this note. Do you really want to like take away the harmony underneath it? I'm noticing that this is happening a lot. Now notice your playback was a little like with the fermata here, it was a little inconsistent, and that's because you sort of took away the fermata from everything. Let's see if we just restore this here, right? It doesn't want to give me a fermata on all of the rest, right? And this is completely missing what's going on here. Yeah, so there's something going on here. You have blank bars here. Huh. I'm not sure. Okay, yeah. There we go. All right. So same thing, like to get the Sibelius playback to work, you really just sort of have to line everything up and put the fermata in the same place. This is weird. This is voice 2. Why is that? It's probably because it was a copy paste thing, right? All right, so let's put this back to that. Right, see, so that will, like in a situation like this, here, let's just copy paste this. Right, see, so like the fermata will just sort of sit on here, and maybe it's like maybe you want both sides fermata, but like you don't really need it here. But like okay, so back to the question, and that is, why do you want this chord to stop before the clarinet finishes its solo, right? So why do you want it to be da 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 with nothing under it? Why can't it be da 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 harmony on all the parts, right? Because that's what's going on in the piano part, right? He's holding that chord da 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 in that wonderful recording by Spencer. All right, okay, so just something to think about, right? Okay. Now, continuing on. Da, 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 da. This is really nice. Now, and if you'd wanted to, you could just like put a slur over everything, up to here maybe, and then another slur for these parts right in here. And then just think, if you have slurs over repeated notes, the players will sort of interpret that as a kind of a portato kind of a thing. So if that's going to be the situation, then you could just really easily do that. Let's see. Right? You could do something like this. Sorry, this is just too crowded in here. I see you've turned off the default see, so you've turned off the magnetic layout, or maybe you don't have it. Maybe I'm getting a version of your score from before that existed. Anyway, so you could put, say, portato under, like intentionally ask for it, right? And maybe that would be an effect that you would want for everybody, right? But it's just a little too fussy. But anyway, right? Or you could even just have this be like one long, held whole note, right? Anyway, so just like think about like what are the realities of this right in here. I'll just get rid of all that editing. All right, and this is really kind of cool. The bassoons, and it's like this is something you kind of wouldn't want to put a slur over, right? Because it's it takes away any kind of feeling of articulation to just kind of mush it all together like that, right? Okay, and then here you've got like very, very bright piccolo and flute and octaves. And then ba-da-da-da-dum. This is nice. See, I like this doubling in here. And then the pushing forward with the brass. It's really nice. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da, push. Right? You could even put the push like starting from the second beat in these bars too. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da, push. Rather than da-da-da-da, push. And this is going to be very, very bright and chirpy. The piccolo, and it'll start to lose strength going towards here, and then you're pushing out of it towards the forte. That's kind of a cool effect, really. But the piccolo really will be losing a lot of energy and a lot of strength right in here. Like the doubling with the first violin. Apologies for the machine noise in the background. They just took a ton of work around here on houses and there's like a road repair up the street and so on right now. So, alrighty. So yeah, I feel that the dynamics could be a little bit more. So this is all sort of mezzo forte, piano, mezzo piano on the solo, Like you could give a little bit of flex here to the da 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 da. I mean you could breathe into these phrases a little bit. Yeah, I mean everything is mezzo forte and then forte dun dun dun. I mean it's not bad. Yeah, it's all right. Right, and then maybe this should be actually piano or mezzo piano, so you have more of a contrast, right? Because it just really doesn't seem to be much of a contrast the way it is. So I would say that like the strong bars here are nicely scored in terms of like the harmonic picture, but the alternating bars are just a little weak in terms of their harmonic construction, right? So I think if you just stuck to Beethoven's harmonic scheme there, then I think that it just works great, right? Of course, you could do something really impressionistic or, psychologically strange, right? Or modernistic or, a bunch of different options. You could do something a little bit more romantic there, more like Berlioz. But one way or another, like the whole sense of climbing, da, da, is taken away by doing this, this sort of G, C, right? So like when you have that descending bass right there. Right. Yeah, yes, the harmonization is just a little strange here. Yeah. I mean, it's cool though. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not sure that it completely works. This is strange. There are these brackets. So here you've got another bracket right here. Maybe this was just like excuse me, something that popped up unintentionally. Right. Okay, so that's pretty much all I had to say. I'm going to go drink some water, and then while I'm doing that, why don't you guys have a listen to the next piece, which, as I understand, our next participant is actually a student of Frano's, and that's great, Frano. I mean, you have a lot to offer, and you're such an imaginative orchestrator, and you have such wonderful colors. Here I am picking your piece apart and lecturing to you about Ah1 and stuff like that. That doesn't mean that your efforts aren't great and that you don't have something really valid going on here. It's just wonderful to look through it and to continue this conversation together over how to orchestrate different things, and also to get yet another great entry from you. So thank you so much for this and for being a part of this once again. And I really hope that you will participate next year because it's also an incredible piece that you wouldn't want to miss. It's like music that floats to you. Like it's like music that kind of floats down from the heavens on a perfumed cloud. You know what I mean? It's that kind of music. It's just really transcendent, and you would never guess by listening to it who the composer was. All right. So, anyways, leaving that little clue. Thanks again, Frano. See, like here I'm just sitting around correcting your score here. Yeah. So it's just kind of strange. All right. There we go. There's our bar rest. Alrighty. All right. So, anyways, a great entry. Just so fun. And just wonderful. Just reworking of certain things and certain impulses and certain emotional emphases. Right. That's the thing that I enjoyed the most about it. So great job. So, while I go clear my throat, why don't you guys have a listen to the next piece? Great work, Matthias, and this is an awesome first entry to the orchestration challenge. So, really nice. There are a bunch of things that you could do to make this work a little bit, a little bit better, a little bit more naturally for the orchestra, and also, be a little truer to the material. I noticed that there are a few things that you changed or left out, which I just don't understand why you didn't put them in, right? They're just they ennoble the music, and they enhance the mood of the music, right? So I don't understand why, but maybe you can tell me in the comments, or maybe when you were maybe when you were working with a template, there were some things that didn't get copied over to different parts, or maybe you had a different idea about how to do it. So it's all valid. Just a few little things here. I'm really happy with the way that you marked. One on the, like, you just had like your single oboe part here. So you told us single flute. That's great here, and then a duet on the oboes and so on. And we'll talk about the implications of those things. Here you say bassoons, but you don't tell us how many bassoons are playing, right? How many? Is this one player, two players? How many? And then we have our horns in F and so on. And, just sort of like, this is sort of borderline. There are aspects to this which could make it a more 19th century type score, right? But then you would have to reinsert some of Beethoven's original harmony. I was really kind of surprised at like the lack of that last bar, da 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 bum bum da da da. What? And then there wasn't anything there. It sort of left me hanging. But all the same, it's just such a fun, really nice arrangement. Now here, did you notice how sort of in the mock-up the flutes sound like very blocky, right? They sound very almost starchy, just not really. They don't really have a whole lot of smoothness to them. And one of the reasons for that is that you just have left out any slurs, right? Which you could easily have put in, say, like this. This is a pretty good pattern. And then here, you could just slur the whole bar, right? And then that would just definitely make these parts very smooth, and yet have the way that you add slurs to a wind or string part gives the part some nuance, some emphasis, some shape, right, to the articulation. So those are some things that you want to think about. Just some basics, right? Just things that you notice when you score read some Beethoven, for instance, right? Just how does 2 centuries of interpretation, almost 3 centuries now, was it 2 centuries? 2 centuries of interpretation have made these works kind of it's like this literature of people contributing and thinking about things and so on. Now here, I think you could easily have gotten rid of this rest here, and I see why you did it, right? So like by putting this rest in here, you kind of give us a bit of a break going into the next part. So, but nobody worry about that. You don't have to. Like, I understand how it all works. But yeah, better to go 2/4. Like, so this is the first beat of the 2/4 bar, and this is the second beat of the 2/4 bar, which serves as a pickup bar to the next bar, right? So that's the way that Beethoven scored it, and I think we should stick to that, right? Okay. So like in terms of the harmonization and so on, this is kind of nice because you're keeping the oboe off of that low middle C, which might have a tendency to play out a little bit, right? It doesn't really have that perfect curve. So it's a dynamic curve, anyways. So it just depends on whether or not this little harmonic third is perceived to be part of the melody, right? So if it isn't, if the audience just says, "Oh, okay, they're playing a little chord," and then the oboes or the first oboe came in on da 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 dum. See, we end up not having dun da 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 da. Right, so we lose the first note of the melody, right? So just something has to be done, I think, to bring out this sounding C, this sounding middle C, in order to make it connect with the melody better. And then just da 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 da. If you just add these slurs the way that I've done, and then listen to your mock-up, you'll hear that it has really solved a lot of problems. Now here, I think that there could be a bit fuller of a harmony. All right, if you're just completely transcribing note for note the original piano part, which is just like, it's 4 notes of harmony, 2 of which are an F octave, right? So we have this F octave here, and then we have we just have these eighth notes which drop out immediately, right? So there's no, you end up with no harmonic support except for just like these octaves below. And just the resonance of the timpani, which is really dies off by the time you get here. So there's a bit of contrabass below this, and that's it, right? So and then da 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 dum. Couldn't we have kept this note right here, this A, right? So the sounding A plus the sounding F, right? And you have 2 clarinets here, right? One of them could be going da da, and then hold on, and then you get a full F major chord right there at the end, right? So and then have things last until the through the fermata in all the harmony. Anyway, and you could even add a little bassoon note here off the end of the timpani, so that, or a cello note, so that you have like a more settled, even harmony throughout. Right? Then you have this wonderfully tranquil sound at the end of this introduction, rather than just a couple of octaves plus a little bit of bass down here. All right, now moving on. Da 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 da. Do you really want this to be da da down, up down, up down, up down, up down, up down, up down? Do you just really want that back and forth kind of bowing? Do you really want the da 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 the violas just to have no slurring at all? All right. I wonder if you had a chance to think over some of these things, maybe talk about it with Frano or whatever, or just maybe compare it to some of Beethoven's scoring. If you really want to commit to this as a more abrupt kind of a, you might want to put in, say, staccato notes, right? But does this really need to be like so separated, right? I mean, if that feels right to you, that's great. But you could have also had a slur here and a slur there, right? And then a slur here and a slur there, and then a slur there across these 3 notes. And then matching in these parts. Now, here you have a situation where you have, I guess, is this first clarinet or a duet, both clarinets? You don't really even need to have a duet oboes here, right? Because everything's mezzo piano, and everything's very soft. Piano, mezzo piano, piano crescendo to mezzo forte. It's like everything is really underpowered here, Matthias. I think you could just put in a lot more muscle. I mean, what does Beethoven say? He says that this is piano dolce, right? There's no need to go to mezzo piano. Mezzo piano is sort of a moderation, right? It's not really soft. Well, is it loud? No, it's not really loud either. Well, what is it? Well, it's kind of a good mixture, kind of a dynamic. But I mean, is it really a dynamic with which you want to start a passage, right? I mean, is it something that you want to, just kind of, yeah, mezzo, right? Do you really want that to be the beginning? You need to think to yourself, Matthias, that that piano as a dynamic is a vast wilderness. It is a vast expanse of dynamic possibility. It's not just one little notch on the dynamic thermometer, right? It isn't just like, okay, well, pianissimo, then piano, then mezzo forte. Oops, I bumped my mic. So it's not just like that. It really is its own wilderness. It's its own wonderland, right? So it's okay to start piano here, right? And then you have somewhere to push from. Where can you push from here with mezzo piano but to mezzo forte, right? But whereas if you start off piano, the players can push into wherever they like. They can just make it a little bit warmer depending on what, how much the conductor is asking them to do, right? But okay, so the problem here is when you transcribe this, I don't know if you did a copy paste from the template or whether you transcribed it just right off of the piano score or whatever. You left out the beautiful, like there's this beautiful sense of the octave melody working with the harmonization, right? And you've got this wonderful harmonization at the 10th, right? That it's just against that kind of, against the F kind of hanging on, it just has this wonderful sound. It's magic, right? And you took out that harmonization, right? We just sort of have a few stray notes down here that don't really relate to what Beethoven asked for, right? What did he want here? He wanted a B flat, under these Ds, right? He wanted a C under these E's, right? But you put in a D. You put in a D here and a C there, right? So it just completely doesn't agree with Beethoven's original intentions. And then here you've got this A here, right? But without an F root underneath, the way Beethoven has scored it in the piano score, the A doesn't make as much sense, right? So you just watch out for all of the little nuances that are in the piano score that guide you, right? Okay, now this is really nice in here. You've got you've got harmonic support in the da 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 dum, like in your brass, and you've got this at octaves. I really like the way that this is kind of scored in a nice slurred beam groups here. And with the duet flutes, you get like a kind of a sort of a much breathier sound than with just a single flute. But, here you're sort of bringing out, this is mezzo piano and that's piano. I don't understand why. Why are the flutes louder? Is it, because you don't want them to get swallowed up by the sound of the strings, which is something that happens, which I've discussed in other tips. And then here you have pizzicato, pa-pa-pa-pa-pum. Are you sure you don't, if you have pizzicato here, then why isn't this, if you want this to match, maybe this should be staccato in the bassoons, right? Okay. All right, and then here, arco. So why does this have a slur, but this doesn't have a slur? So here you're going, da, and here you're going, down, or up, down, up, right? So it's just like, All right, now, similar to Frano's score that we just looked at, we're missing the dominant seventh here, right? So that, when you take that away, you might be thinking, oh, well, how can I have a dominant seventh there when I have a B natural? Well, that's the exact thing that Beethoven, he's going B natural to C and then to B flat below it, right? So he wants the harmonic tension, da 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 da, and da 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 dum. You see what I'm saying? So this, putting the B flat right here on the fourth beat, pushes the line, pushes this leading tone here, the E, to the F, right? Because it's the tension of the augmented fourth. You could think about it that way, right? So the B flat to the E, and then you just get the resolution, right? The F and the A. Right? So you have these violas sitting here doing nothing. They could be playing a nice arco B flat right here, and then the clarinet could double that, and then you get a beautifully balanced passage right in here. Now, I'm not really convinced by the differences in dynamics overall, except for your brass being pianissimo, if everybody else is playing piano, this doesn't need to be mezzo piano. If everybody else in the orchestra is playing piano and your brass are playing pianissimo, then this is nicely balanced here. But this whole thing with like piano here, mezzo forte there, mezzo piano here, and piano. Look, trust your conductor, trust the players to balance things in the right way. And maybe it will sound a little off in your mock-up, but the mock-up is the mock-up. That's not the real thing. And if you're really worried about it, you could always like mark piano here. If you feel it's out of balance, you can mess around with a mix, right? This little mixer down here. Or you could like put in like an invisible mezzo piano here, and then like have the set Sibelius's playback so it ignores the marked dynamic of piano and it plays the hidden dynamic of mezzo piano, right? So like if the sound set is really out of balance, then you can fix it in ways like that. Okay, but really seriously, try to score to the same dynamic with everything, all right? But what's the dynamic here for the timpani, right? So, and what does Beethoven say to do? Ya da 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 da, and then he wants everybody soft, dun dun dun. Or you could maintain the strength, ya da 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 da. Everybody, dun dun dun, mezzo forte, and then answer softly, dun dun. Now back to mezzo forte, dun dun dun. So you can take some liberties with that, just so that it makes more sense orchestrally, right? Just because like the piano score says one thing dynamically, you can always choose to do something that makes more sense orchestrally. All right, now here I think that this is way too long on your slur, and the slur looks like it's hanging over into the next bar, right? Like where's the end of this? Yeah, so it should be right over this last triplet. However, that's not the problem. The problem is like here the player's going up, down, and then they have to play up on the downbeat. Up, down, up. All right. So look, it'd be way better to go up, down, up. Right? So just split this. All right? So that makes a whole lot more sense. Actually, I flipped the slurs. So yeah. So up, down, up, down. So you have a nice strong downbeat on this, right? So also here's the thing, it's like crescendo. So if you're if you're piano already and then you go crescendo, then you have to say piano subito, right? It's just better to keep things. It's something that you might think would be obvious in a Beethoven or Mozart score with the way that they use dynamics, but it isn't always. And you might be working with like a community orchestra or a student orchestra with a piece like this. So you have to make these sort of inconsistencies clear to them, things that wouldn't be inconsistent with Beethoven. All right. So look, I hope that those suggestions are helpful to you, Matthias. My goal with these evaluations is not to rip apart somebody's beautiful ideas, but to build them up, right? How can we make this orchestration stronger, right? And so I hope I've given you a few ideas on how to like some score format, leaving in certain parts, not messing with certain if you're going to mess with it, really understand why the harmony is working the way that it is, right? If you're going to make a change to the harmony, just like understand all the ramifications, and then don't take out like when Beethoven is giving you a leading tone, don't take out the dominant seventh, right? If he's got one in there, it's there for a really good reason. Alrighty, so but other than that, wow, Matthias, what a great first entry, and I'm so looking forward to seeing what you would possibly do with next year's entry, because I think that you would. And it's so different from this. Like, it's just a completely different world. And yet it would be really satisfying, I think, for you to take on. All right? It would be interesting to hear if you could do that. So thanks so much. So, wow, we have gotten through 5 scores here in this compilation. So let's take a look at our 6th and last entry for the C group, sequential letter C, of the Orchestration Challenge 2023. Thank you, Rob. What a great way to finish this compilation of entries. Yeah, just so nice. I love some of the ideas, like some of the harmonization, some of the reimagination of the score, and so on. Like, I mean, some of this is really not Beethoven at all, right? Like, I sort of like listening to this. Obviously, you're sacrificing the beautiful simplicity of this, part, and then here, like, it's heavily harmonized, right? But all the same, it's like it's different ideas than the original score. You're developing it, you're working it, you're experimenting with it, and you're having fun with it, and that is absolutely essential, right? Now, does the scoring justify the use of natural horns here? I'd say so. I think that, like, this is this is close enough, to a degree, to that 19th century ideal. Like, and maybe the harmony's a little overdone, compared to what they would experiment with. But yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily like wrong or bad or overblown, but it's just much more intense than would be the practice back then. But I still think that your overall intentions justify that, and really simple, ones and fives here, all beautiful open tones. So I mean, wow, that's much less complicated than anything I did, right? And probably closer to Beethoven than mine, I would say. So let's talk a little bit about bowing. Okay, so is there really a big difference between going down, up, up, and going down, up, right? Because I mean, will the articulation be all that different on this little, this last little 16th note, whether it is coming from a slur or bowed separately or not? I really don't think so. And then if you just add a slur here, oops, right, then you end up with a nice even down, up, down, and like that, and then the up, like that, as the bow finishes on the 16th, it kind of adds a little bit of extra stress anyways, right? And then I really like this. But here, why slur why slur from a pickup across the bar line? Because then we lose the emphasis of the downbeat here. Right? So similar to what happens here. I mean, I don't see that in here. I don't see the need for it, right? It's not like you're pushing into it, right? You're not going, da, da, da. You're just going, like, I mean, it would be better just to have a solid down bow there. Up, down, up, down, up. You see, it's just like it's built right into it. There's like no need for you to lengthen this, right? I really love the way that you spelled this out. And then here, it like even makes less sense to me in the string parts, because you're pushing forward to this, and then you're creating more bowing, and then you're slurring across here, and you're kind of you're taking away any kind of joined emphasis that would occur in the rest of the strings, or with the first violins, with that really crucial, down bow on this, because like they are leading everybody, right? So like remember back to what I said in my pitfalls video about the importance of the first violins in leading the orchestra in Beethoven symphonies, right? I mean, they're important in leading the orchestra all the time, right? Don't get me wrong, but unusually so compared to today's scoring. Well, I mean, not every single second, but in most orchestral music that isn't just wildly modernistic and straying very, very far away from the center of orchestration, then the first violins have a role. So if they are leading the players forward, the concertmaster is going to be, everybody's watching the concertmaster, and the concertmaster is going to be giving a down bow there, and all the firsts are going to be playing together. And what are the middle strings going to be doing? They're going to be going do-wah, right? You know what I mean? So why not just everybody just hit this down bow right here, right? And then you can do up bow on this, get rid of the slur, and then slur this first beat together, right? And just make it nice and smooth. And then up bow, get rid of this slur, down bow. Down. And this is going to be, down, up. And I love the way that you have kept the harmony going here. So it's nice and full, right? That's great. And then once again, why not just go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down? Because I don't really see, up, down, up. I mean, it just feels weird, yeah. Now, see, if you go up, down, then when you go up here, then you get the natural energy of the strings pushing into the downbeat here, right? And then if this is all down bow, then you're ready to go up bow here, which is very powerful. And also you get the natural, cessation of energy, the natural relaxing of energy over, a few beats, right? See, so it just makes much more sense to be a little bit more square about this, square, if you would. And then here, I like the the way that you're just kind of keeping this, and you don't really have to give this any extra articulation style or anything like that. You don't have to make it mezzo staccato or portato or anything like that. I think you just have these as single notes. The players will just get that kind of Mozart vibe or early Beethoven vibe from it. And then this is really nice. One of my criteria is there a natural transition to octaves? The thing about it is there isn't. However, the introduction of the new flavor here of bassoon and clarinet make that academic, right? So it doesn't matter, right? And then here we have some of that harmonization, right? Which realizes itself in the piano part as a tenth, right? As a kind of a parallel tenth. But would you interpret it as thirds here, right? So, but all the same, right? With the working together with the way that you scored the violas and cellos, it just all works out really nicely. And of course, with the F horns, kind of playing those octave sounding Fs, right? So this, I approve of this. I don't approve of the slurring, but I approve of the shape and the color and the intention, the piano dolce and so on. All works great. Okay, so that puts us here, leggermente, right? What happened to my little leggermente? Right, just put that in here. It's the players need to know that, right? They want, Beethoven wants them to be nimble, right? He just really wants them to be spry and, flitting around like a little hummingbird, right? That's what he wants there. So down, down, down is nice, and then down, down, down is really, really cool. Now, see, I'm not so convinced by this, right? Simplified this instead of going bum 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 bum, right? We got rid of that. So I'm not so sure this really works for me, and especially because this is a unison, right? It's not. These parts are all just it's just the same thing in both parts, right? It's not like it's an octave or anything like that. And then here, of course, you're like harmonizing this, and that's kind of cool. It's not, once again, it's like that's something I don't think that Beethoven or his late contemporaries would do. Actually, most of his late contemporaries were at the beginning of their careers, or their careers would come to a sudden end right around the time he died. Like, poor Schubert, God, just all he wanted was just a little money so that he could get treatment for his, for his, like, his condition. And, his jerk of a publisher, Diabelli, wouldn't, it wouldn't just even pay him a little extra or, buy more of his manuscripts at what he was worth. And then just suddenly Weber died. What a tragedy. Oh man, the guy had so much imagination and so on. And then what happened? This huge fireball erupted in everybody's, once in that vacuum, sprang Berlioz, right? So, and then the whole world changed, right? For better or worse, according to Mendelssohn. But then, Mendelssohn, like, thinking, like, would Mendelssohn harmonize like this, or early Schumann or whatever? No, it's like, probably not. But, I mean, that doesn't mean that it's wrong. Like, once again, it just is like, it's just a choice that is a little bit out of period. But it still doesn't justify me saying, oh, well, might as well not have natural horns. No, I think the natural horn approach here works really well. And I think that it helps to sort of stabilize any little extra deviations from that period, and keep it more centered around a Beethoven sound. So yeah, so it's nice. Yeah, so up, down, up, and then they'll like just recover their bow, and they'll give themselves another up bow. Down, up, down, up. And then same thing here, up. Up, down, up, down. Yeah, I mean, maybe this is a place to not slur. Dun, dun, dun. Just like really give each beat some articulation. This is strange. You've got two slurs happening here. Yeah, and I think it's also really especially important for the bass. Bum, bum, bum. I mean, I just think that needs... Yeah, no, it just needs a little bit of walking, right? And this is nice, like just keeping it in strings. Dun, dun. Once again, like I feel like if we're going crescendo here, and it's only like a bar and a quarter, right? It could easily be hairpins. Piano crescendo to piano, right? So like the scoring here is so Beethovenian, right? So in period. There's almost unnecessary to say subito piano, but I would still do it. Like if you were having this read by, say, community regional orchestra or something like that. Unless like they were like a pro orchestra, a collegium or a camerata that played this kind of style of music all the time, I would say, yeah, just give them a piano subito here, in the parts that had a crescendo before them. All right, and then dun 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 dun. This is nice. Yeah, see, I think what I was sort of griping before, Frano, if you are like still with us, was that I think that I needed your chord here to be a G minor, and I think that it was was it a B flat or something like, or actually you did it in G, right? So it was a C chord. Sorry, I'm just getting into the weeds and the details of each piece and not really thinking about all the details of what I just looked at. So apologies if so. Yeah, so this is nice. You absolutely do not need to have a duet here on this oboe line. All right, keep it just keep it a single line, right? Because it's a single voice amongst all these other voices. This is fine though. The holding on to like having the let's say first oboe and first bassoon in octaves as the second bassoon goes bum, 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 right? And then yeah, and this is just so nice, the simplicity of the timpani and the horns working together. Yeah, I mean, a lot of timpanists feel like the horn the horns are an extension of them, especially when they're playing in this period, right? Um, and they almost feel like they are almost more of their own section, or like almost more of a horn section, or more part of the horn section, right? And like in some scoring, they really are just just working together so much that like they just like the intonation of the timpani to the horns is probably more important. Like, and then everybody just tunes to that, like, or just corrects to that and shapes around it, because oftentimes the first horn player is going to have the best ear in the orchestra, possibly, or maybe the timpanist will have the best ear in the orchestra, because they're just constantly sort of micro adjusting to, like the hall will make everything go slightly flat, and so it doesn't matter what the little notch on their drums on the kettle says. They're still going to bring things down a hair, right? Or maybe the hall will, or maybe like the winds will go a little sharp and the strings will go a little flat, and the timpanist just has to find somewhere in the middle where it'll work better. So yeah, anyways, but not to get into all that minutia, Rob, I just really liked this. I just felt that also just coming at the end of all of our compilation of 6 really great entries, it just really does put things in perspective, and it's a really nice kind of period style effort. Yeah. So yeah, just think about. Yeah, I mean, you could easily have actually gone to mezzo forte here, right? And then answered piano. But, like, then what does that do to your accompaniment with horns? So here, like, you're following the piano score, and I think it works out great. So that's all good. So anyway, so great work, all 6 of you. I'm so happy that that I'm seeing so many returning faces and some new contributors as well. It's almost like it's almost like this whole community. Well, that's what this is. It's an orchestration community, right? But it's almost like a community of people who are entering these challenges and taking part, and some are not able to do it this year for whatever reason. I almost was not able to do this year, but I'm so happy that I was able to, because like this is just so exciting, and it's giving me so much to look at these. It's just making me feel really happy, as you can tell by my voice right now. So with that, I will just thank everybody, and everybody out there watching, my Patreon crowd who made this all possible, and all of the contributors, all the participants from the website subscription people, and like all of their various interpretations of this. It really makes things so interesting, and it has this wonderful life of its own. So thanks for that, everybody, and I will see you very soon with sequential letter D.